Folks at home, welcome back to the Crimson Oak Pond, and if you're new to this series, we built this 5-acre pond over the past year, and it took us several months to get all of the dirt excavated, and we had to bring in several truckloads of clay, and we also built an island, a dock, and got all the structure in place, and then it took a couple of months to get it full of water. After that, we stocked it with a bunch of bait fish, including bluegills and threadfin shad, and not long after that, we stocked it with these little 2-inch aggressive bass. And we're going to start today's video off with an update on them because they've gotten much bigger than 2 inches and they're more aggressive than ever. And as you can see here, they've started teaming up in schools to chase some of these bait fish around the pond. So as the fall starts approaching and the days are getting shorter and that cooler weather starts rolling in, a lot of the bait fish like threadfin shad will start moving to the shallower water. And naturally, the bass follow the bait around, and that brings them out of that deeper water where they spent the summer into these shallow pockets and coves. And since we had successful spring and summer spawns, the pond is full of bait fish right now, including tiny bluegills, baby tilapia, and thousands of threadfin shad. And the threadfins are easy targets because, as you can see here, they form these big bait clouds, which are those black balls you see forming here in the pond. And that makes it easier for the bass to target them. And largemouth bass are one of the smartest fish out there, and they realize that if they team up together in a school, they'll have a better chance of success. And it's a common belief among fishermen that most schooling bass are smaller fish. And that's the case a lot of times, but with largemouths, they typically like to school with fish their same size. And on that note, pay special attention to one of these bass we're about to show you, because I have a really good feeling it's one of our pet bass, Bonnie and Clyde, that we released into the pond. So all of the smaller fish are bluegills, about 6 to 8 inches long, and it's pretty easy to spot the tiger bass when they're swimming around them, because they're about twice the size of the bluegills. But if you'll notice the fish at the top of the video by the tree limb, it's much bigger than the other tiger bass beside it. And the most noticeable feature on this fish is how wide it is. And typically when you see a fish that wide, they're at least 3 to 5 pounds. And there's only 2 fish in this pond that size, and that's our 2 pets we call Bonnie and Clyde. So as we're watching some of this footage, you'll see that big fish link up with one of these schools, which is pretty cool because it's the first time we've seen one of our pets since we released them in the pond. And we raised them in aquariums for 4 to 5 years before that, so they'll always have a special meaning to us. But now we're going to watch some of these tiger bass and how aggressive they're getting, and there's no better time of year than in the fall, because they move into the shallower water where I can actually see them and film them and study them a little bit better. But if you'll notice, they're cruising along the banks, and there's plenty of bait everywhere they're swimming, but they're looking for those ambush points. And it's really interesting to see how they work together in little groups of 6 to 8 to get into that perfect scenario where they can attack, and the bait fish start panicking, and it makes it an easy meal for them. But an interesting fact about bass is they can swim in short bursts of up to 18 to 20 miles an hour, much faster than those smaller bait fish. And on average, a bass can swim 3 body lengths per second. So most of these fish are around 14 inches, which makes it about 3.5 feet per second. That's moving. And bass are cold-blooded animals, which means their body temperature is going to be the same as the water temperature. So this pond water temperature is about as high as it's going to be all year because we don't get much rain this time of year to cool it off, and their metabolism fluctuates with the water temperature. So this time of year, their high metabolism is going to keep them on the move and eating pretty much throughout the day and night. But after watching the bass the past couple months, they've learned the feeder system that we have. So we basically got 3 bluegill feeders that go off 3 times a day, and they'll stage around those feeders and target the bluegills and some of the bigger tilapia during that short feeding window. And then they school up when the pellet feeders aren't going off. And my best guess is that they're looking for the easiest targets there are, and that's the baby tilapia. They're an extremely slow swimming fish and an easy target for a bass of any size. And as you watch these bass swim around, you can see they pass a lot of the bigger bait fish, and when they see those baby tilapias, they move in and attack. But this particular time of the year, the pond is full of more bait fish than any other time of year because we had a successful threadfin shad spawn back in May, and then the bluegills and tilapia have been spawning since April. So there's an abundance of bait under the water, and there's also a wide variety of different sizes. So we got the geese out, flying in their V formation over the pond today. But take a look at what I caught in one of the prawn traps. So we had it just sitting up here on the bank. And look at this little guy who worked his way in there. And I'm not 100% sure what kind of snake it is, but I have a pretty good idea. But leave a comment down below if you know the exact species of this snake. So I left him for a little while and came back, and he's pretty much worked his way out of the trap. And if he's the type of snake I think he is, I think he's good for the farm, so we released him back to do his job. So we've been trapping prawns out of the pond the past few months, and all the prawns have pretty much gotten too big to fit in the traps anymore, but we still put them out because there's hundreds of these mosquito fish in this pond, and so every time I get out here I try to collect a bunch of them, and you'll get to watch us feed them to the bass later on tonight. But we did catch one prawn in this trap, and this is going to be one of the smallest sizes left in this pond, which is a great size for feeding the bass. So in our last video, I asked you guys what you thought we should do with our pet bass Tiger that lives in the 300-gallon aquarium. And a lot of you said we should release him back into the 5-acre pond, and I think that's a good idea. So Tiger was one of the bass in this bucket when we initially stocked the pond, and then after a couple months of him living in the pond, we caught him when he was a tiny little guy and moved him into our aquarium. So I think my goal for the next video is going to be to tag him and release him back into the 5-acre pond, and then catch one of these tiny bass fry that are living in the pond now and keep him as a pet to replace Tiger. And in our last video, we strapped a camera to a bass and followed along as they swam throughout the pond, and I saw a few of these smaller bass that are about 2 to 3 inches long. So if you'll notice, we got some mats right here on the edge of the pond, and that actually makes it a perfect safe haven for a lot of these smaller bait fish. So right now the pond is absolutely full of tiny bluegills, bass, and baby tilapia. And if you watch this tiny bluegill, they're even eating some of that algae and bugs and insects and other things that get in it. And they count on that as their primary food source in the early stages of their life. But this week I put several cameras underwater so we could find the locations of where these tiny bass were hanging out. So hopefully I can catch one for next week's video. And I'm not sure if you can tell by the camera angle, but these bass are really small, so I'm not going to be able to catch them with a rod and reel. So if any of you have a good idea of how I can capture one of these little guys, leave me a comment down below. My thoughts are I'm going to find the area where most of them are hanging out, and then maybe put one of these prawn traps in there with some of the little bait fish in it and see if I can get a little bass to swim in it. And now that I think about it, we may end up trying to catch 2 bass like we did with Bonnie and Clyde. We could also put one of these smaller bluegills in there, but we did that with Tiger. If you guys remember, we had a small bluegill named Copper that we caught the same time frame and put him in the 50-gallon tank with Tiger. And after a month or two, Tiger realized he was getting much bigger and much hungrier and started trying to eat Copper, so we put Copper back in the pond. But you can see there's an abundance of bait fish in the shallow areas of the pond right now, which is really good news for the pond. If all the fish are spawning, that means they're happy and healthy. And the reproduction of these smaller fish is going to be key in future years of this pond growth. Now we're going to see some of the footage from our Bonnie Bayou cam. And it's one of the hot spots on the pond, and there's a ton of wildlife that visit this area. You can see we got a buck stopping by for a drink of water. And all the geese are back in town. And one that I'm not so happy to see, the osprey diving down trying to catch our fish. Missed this time. And as the sun starts setting, you see Mr. Longlegs on the right. And some crows taking a bath. And a doe heading back early one morning after hanging out in the peanut fields. And if you pay attention, you can see some fish swimming under the water right there. Some smaller thread fins on the right. And those real still fish with their glowing eyeballs, those are tilapia. Another fish eater stopping by to visit. And the geese out here flexing on all the other wildlife and ducks. There's a good close-up of them. This is probably the most we've ever had. Looks like there's about 20 of them. And a bachelor group of bucks cruising through. And a deer stopping by late in the evening. You can even see the moon setting back there in the background. And today's video is brought to you by Sterling Pacific. And if you're in the market for a high quality, good looking travel case, then Sterling Pacific is a perfect fit for you. All of their travel cases are made out of 5052 high grade aluminum. and have premium Italian leather handles. And these have been perfect for carrying around some of my more expensive camera and drone equipment, and they're equipped with double spring-loaded combination locks to keep those valuables safe. And this one in particular is a 35L cabin travel case, which is the maximum allowable size for carry-on luggage on an airplane. And they're equipped with 2 oversized wheels that make it easy to pull on uneven surfaces. And right away I could tell they replaced all of those inferior plastic components with high-quality aluminum from the trolley housing, corners, and even down to the hubcaps of the wheels. So if you're interested in checking them out, go to sterlingpacific.com/BamaBass. and use my promo code for $300 off. So if you're a pilot or a frequent flyer, I'd highly recommend checking them out. So now let's check in on the Eagle Nest Cam. This is a site we prepared earlier this year, hoping that the eagles would build a nest on it this fall. And to start out with, we got the old Alabama state bird, the buzzard. And to be honest, I don't have a clue if buzzards build nests or how they reproduce, but I hope this doesn't turn into a buzzard tower. It does look like they're inspecting something, maybe looking for some little bugs. But there's a new pair of birds that showed up that I've found very fascinating. And I have no clue what type of bird this is. Some of the facial features on its head kind of look like an owl, but it's definitely not a species of owl. And you can see there's a pair of them. And the first few times they stopped by, I could tell they were bringing something up to eat, and it looked like maybe a small insect or something. And I'll let you guys watch it for a second to see if you can figure it out. So every time they would fly back up here, it seems like they would bring a new insect. And finally, after I got zoomed in close enough on it, I realized that it was a dragonfly. So these birds are so fast, they're actually flying around catching dragonflies and bringing them up here on the platform to eat them. I'll have to say, that's pretty impressive. And here's one of my favorite birds out here at the farm, the kingfisher. He's one of the hardest working birds out here. You can see he's got that long beak, and he uses it to target those smaller bait fish and bluegills, and is pretty accurate with it. And a nice little group of bluebirds stopping by. After all, this is the best view on the farm. And then if you take a look down below the platform, you can see the geese grazing around. So no eagle or owl nest in this video. Fingers crossed that they're going to start building one soon. So we're out here feeding the ducks, and we got a couple friends that come out at night that like something sweet. So we're going to drop a few marshmallows out and see who comes to get them tonight. And I never would have thought it, but raccoons love marshmallows. But as you can see, every time they get them, they're like little bandits, stealing them and running off. They'll sit there and relax and eat the duck food right out of the bowl, but every time they get one of these marshmallows, they run off and hide with it. And maybe they're just hiding it from the other raccoons. And you saw earlier in the video how aggressive the bass are during the daytime. Well, they're just as aggressive at night. So we're going to feed them some of those mosquito fish and the prawns that we caught in the trap. But the thing that I'm happiest about is I've got a small group of bass that'll come up at night, and you can see how relaxed they are. They pretty much know whenever I'm out here on the dock because I make a lot of racket bringing the bucket out here and setting up a chair. And when I first started doing that, anytime they heard a bump or a noise, they'd swim off, and I'd have to wait a little while for things to settle down and for them to come back. But as I mentioned, the bass are really smart, and they start noticing that whenever they hear those sounds, shortly after they get fed. So as you can see, they start gravitating towards the green light because they know the food's coming. But now that I've got a handful of them that'll feed pretty much every night, I'm starting to think about experimenting with other types of bait. So if there's anything in particular you want me to test out and see if these bass will eat, let me know. I was thinking about maybe some worms, crickets, even frogs. There's plenty of different things out there we could test on them just to see if they like it. And I'll also be interested to see if they keep coming up and feeding throughout the winter time. A lot of times bass will get lethargic when the water gets cold, and they won't be quite as aggressive as they are now. But I hope that doesn't happen, because I sure do love watching these topwater blow-ups. Alright, time to do a little bass fishing. We got some stormy conditions today. We're going to be trying out something new that the fish haven't seen, a chatterbait. But if you're not familiar with it, every time we catch a bass, if it doesn't already have a pit tag, we inject one into it, then use the scanner to scan its tag and store that info in the database. We'll keep track of what we caught the bass on, how much it weighed, where we caught it at, and then update that every time we catch the fish. There we go. Tough to beat that. Sun setting, a light drizzle out here. The frog got him. It's a good one. Alright, this fish has been tagged 570194. And she weighs 1.69 pounds. That's a good one. Perfect frogging conditions. And this particular fish is named Xavier, and this is the second time we caught him, and something interesting about him is he gained almost 1/4 of a pound in just a month, which is pretty good growth rates. And both times I caught him right around what I call the big feeder, which means he's probably one of those bass attacking those bluegills when the feeder goes off, and that could explain some of the growth. Yeah, that's a nice one. They're in them weeds. Yep. Alright, this one has not been caught. 14 inches. He's going to be 570027. He's 1.41 pounds. That surprised me a little bit. Got him off the little well pipe. A little fat one. Alright, this fish has been caught. 1571424. 14 inches. 1.47 pounds. And this fish is named Trouble, and it's the second time we caught Trouble. The first time we caught him was back in April, and he's gained some weight in 5 months, but nothing major. So it most likely means he's a male. I saw that fish jump, chasing bait, so I threw it in there right on top of me. He hit it as soon as it hit the water. That's kind of like cheating. A lot of them same size today. Another one that's been caught. 1571208. Another 1.49. I can tell they're all the same size. So this fish is named Dixie, and it's the second time we caught her. And one of the alarming stats on her is she weighs the exact same amount as she did back in May. So even though she's gained 2 inches, her weight hasn't increased. So stats like this on a single fish aren't that alarming, but if several of them didn't show growth, we could have some issues and possibly have to make some corrections to the pond. Ooh, hit it as soon as it hit the water. Feels like a good one too. Man, that's a chatterbait too, so they must be just sitting up there on the surface. That's why you like to see them there, little butterballs. Another one's been caught. Everybody except one's been caught today. 1.58. I like it when they look like that. And this fish is named Turbo. We also caught it last month, and it's gained over 1/4 pound and grown an inch, so good stats on Turbo. Got you. Second one on the chatterbait. Wow. Man, they just got real heavy. I feel like that's definitely the biggest one of the day right there on the chatterbait. Maybe pushing 2 pounds. Let's see. Hadn't been caught. Big girl. Alright, this fish is 14.5 inches. And the new tag is going to be 570072. Close. 1.78. We're getting there. Nice female. Love to see it. Now we're gonna wrap up the day on that fish. You can see the fog setting in a little bit, but a lot of you guys ask me why we fish here so much, and it just so happens that that's where all the fish are at. So every day I start fishing, I start on that bank and I work my way all the way down and all the way around. And a lot of days I don't catch a fish until I hit that corner over there. So keep in mind, all that's deeper water out there. There's probably some fish in that deeper water, but as you can see, we've got some mats now, and a lot of times in the fall, all these bait fish will be moving up shallow, so the bass are just following them in here. And not to mention, we also designed this dock to be a fish magnet. We got the fresh water pumping in from the well. We got structure all around, the oak throne, lily pads, diffuser, lily pads, island, mats, and a feeder. So all those are big reasons why all the bass like to hang out here at the dock. All right, down here at the half acre feeding the wildlife, and next week we're going to be planting this for our fall and winter crops. But today we're just putting out some Antler Rage, which is a roasted soybean and corn blend, smoking attractant. Them bucks are still putting on some antler growth, so that protein should help them out. And then we'll watch them come in tonight on the camera. And the first pair of bucks that came up had a funky looking guy in it. Sometimes antler growth like that can be from an injury. Not sure about that guy. But his counterpart has a nice rack. You can tell they're still in velvet, and probably going to be getting rid of that soon. Got some more bucks showing up, including a raccoon. But check out this next clip. So this is the first time I've ever seen bucks fighting with their feet. And it's very common for does to do it because that's all they have to fight with, but usually bucks run off other bucks with their antlers. But it's got me curious, wondering if bucks don't fight whenever they're in velvet. Maybe their antlers are too sensitive. Not 100% sure on that one, but it seems like there's a dominant buck in this group that only wants to fight with his feet. And speaking of fighting, a couple of raccoons fighting over the last couple pieces of protein. So I've had dozens of comments where people are saying you should let natural plants and flowers and things grow around the pond. Well, you guys are going to be happy because the pond's edge is full of naturally occurring flowers, or I'm not sure, this could even be a weed, but it's budding right now, and you can see we got yellow flowers around the entire pond's edge. So I know the ducks and other wildlife will enjoy that. Had some people asking for an update on Oliver. He's doing great ever since he found the pool. The little guy thinks he's a fish and loves to swim. And here's some other cool shots of bucks in velvet out there in the fields, eating leftover peanuts and grass and different variety of crops we got out there right now. And like I mentioned in the next video, we're going to be planting the fall and winter crops because you got to keep these guys fed year round. And the deer aren't the only things eating the grass out there. I found it hilarious watching these ducks jump up and eat the seeds out of the bahia grass. I think that's their way of telling me it's time to cut grass, so the seeds will be a little bit lower for them. And now it's time to feed Mr. Tiger, and again, if all goes well, we're probably going to release him in the next video, and I'll tag him, and then anytime we catch him in the future, we'll track him to see how much more he'll grow in a 5-acre pond versus these aquariums. Because he'll probably be a little bit smaller than all the other bass we put in at the same time as him. So that's going to be an interesting experiment, and Tiger's going to get to hang with all his buddies. But that is going to wrap up this video. Make sure to hit that subscribe button to follow along with all of our pond builds, aggressive bass, and wildlife out here at the Crimson Oak Farm. But I hope y'all enjoyed this video, and we will see you all next time.